So a couple things to expect during that first year from students and just knowing how to support them. We kind of covered a little bit of that about this earlier, but one of the things to keep in mind is that this year looks a little bit different, especially with all that's going on with COVID-19. Normally, move-in day can be a big, stressful day, and it's a big deal for students and families just because it's that day when everyone goes to campus and helps their student move in and helps drop off, their bags, their clothes, their technology, everything they're going to need in their dorms, and just gets to see where they're going to live and just spend some time together before everyone heads back home and the student stays on campus. Well, this year that may look different, especially if the student's going to be staying at home and doing education online. So just keep in mind that's going to look a little bit different. That could be tough on students because they can get really excited about that move-in day and like being on campus. So just keep in mind this is going to be a little bit different to the usual norm for move-in. And depending on how things go, they might be moving in winter term, they might be moving in spring term. It all really depends on how things end up going with the school year. Things are still yet to be determined, so keep an eye out for further news on that. Another thing to keep in mind is if once students are living on campus, weekends can be also one of those points of contention if the parents expect their students to be home to visit every weekend. I think it's a cultural thing, but at least in my family, my parents expected me to come home every weekend, and whenever I didn't, they thought I was upset or that I just didn't want to come visit them anymore, or that I didn't want to spend time with them. And really, students have a lot going on while they're in college, and weekends is a really great time for them to build stronger relationships and connections with their peers on campus, to work on group projects, or if they're working part-time jobs or jobs on campus. It's really good for students and parents to communicate about those things and what those expectations are for coming home. It's really unlikely that students are able to go home every weekend, and really not super, I wouldn't recommend that students go home every weekend. They should definitely spend some weekends on campus to really take advantage of the resources and programs that take place on campus during the weekends, because that's when they're not in class, but there's a lot of other things going on at the university. So just keep that in mind. As parents, it can be kind of tough to let that go and not really see them for a long period of time. Communication, this is also a preference between students and parents, but I know for my parents, it was difficult to learn that I can't just pick up the phone and answer their calls at any time. There's a lot going on, not just during the day with classes, but in the evenings as well, with other programs. If students get involved in leadership or other clubs and activities, they might actually be busy and not be able to, pick up your calls. Texting now is a lot bigger, a lot more popular. So texting is a really safe way to communicate because a student can get back to their parents once they have some free time. And the frequency of communication is up to the parent and student. Sometimes it can be too much, or sometimes it can be too little, and they might miss getting a call every now and then. I know sometimes I got frustrated because my parents would get upset with me and say I wasn't calling them enough, but at the same time, they weren't calling me either. So it has to be something that's agreed upon on both sides. And then one thing I put in here is forming, storming, norming, and performing. It's just a theory of development. So for students, their first time in college, they're gonna struggle a little bit in just getting adjusted to that new rhythm of school and education and just life in general. So that's the forming stage. Eventually, they're gonna hit storming, where some of those challenges and struggles are really going to be noticed more because perhaps if they're taking classes online, that's not something they're used to. They're struggling, they're falling behind, they're not turning in assignments, or they're just not logging into class. That could be a big issue. That's where if you start noticing those issues, they really need to be addressed, or something needs to be done. If the student needs to drop a class or audit the course or ask for help or tutoring, you do need to keep an eye on that because if that student doesn't get into the norming phase before it's too late into the term, it could mean that that student's not going to be passing their classes and going to continue to struggle. So then you go into norming, and that's where the students really find the rhythm of things for themselves and start to get adjusted into that new format for whether it be online classes or on campus, asking for help. And then you get into performing. Once they really got used to it and got the hang of things, where they can actually, perform at their best. So just keep in mind, students go through those phases. And as a parent, it's really good to just keep an eye on that and how they're doing, and suggest that they get support when they're in that storming phase, whether it be academic advising, tutoring, financial support, whatever it may be. As parents, it's always really great to keep in mind that there is a lot of resources on campus to help them, and just giving them a little bit of a nudge or push to gain access to those.